Screencast 1. Learning disabilities is a term used to describe a group of neurological conditions that interferes with a person's learning. It's considered a hidden handicap. Learning disabilities is an umbrella term that is used to describe listening, speaking, reading, and math disorders, and these learners may experience frustration, anger, depression, anxiety, and worthlessness. A timeline for learning disabilities, the most important being in 1963, the formation of the Association for Children with Learning Disabilities, Congress passing PL 94-142 in 1975, and Congress passing IDEA in 1985. I think the 5 most important leaders in special education are Samuel Orton, Anna Gillingham, Bessie Stillman, Romalda Spalding, and Grace Ferdinand, because they responded to the need of special education by developing alternate methods to teach students who couldn't learn to read by memorizing sight words. Public Law 94-142 is known as the Education of All Handicapped Children Act. It guaranteed all children 3 to 21 that they would receive a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. These kids were educated in general classrooms until they could not make progress in regular classrooms due to their disability. It's now called IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and it's for more specific learning disabilities. Section 504 is a Civil Rights Act designed to help students who might not qualify under IDEA regulations. It includes handicaps and programs that receive federal funding, and all school-age children that have had a physical or mental impairment that substantially limited a major life activity. There was a quote that said, "Impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities such as caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, and working." The causal factors for learning disabilities may be a familial factor, pregnancy difficulties such as prematurity, prenatal conditions such as oxygen deprivation, a birth trauma such as a droppage, or exposure to lead, aluminum, arsenic, mercury, and other neurotoxins at a certain age. Incident factors, 5 to 30% of the population is thought to be LD, 20% of the U.S. students struggle to read, and many have found to have had a learning disability but do not have services provided because there's an ability versus performance discrepancy. If they perform well enough, they don't get those services. And there are more boys than girls. There's about a 3-to-1 ratio, and this is thought to be caused by susceptibility of brain damage and disruptivity in the classroom. Primary characteristics of a learning disability include perceptual deficits, such as misinterpretation of sensory information, reading deficits, phonological processing issues. 50% of the LD have reading deficits, inability to tease out sounds, such as water being spelled W-A-T-R, phonological memory, inability to learn symbols and recall quickly, and lack of mnemonic awareness leads to difficulty in reading later in life. Many people who have learning disabilities have co-occurring conditions. The 3 most prevalent conditions are ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which co-occurs with approximately 1 out of 3 every individuals, and is characterized by impulsivity, distractibility, inattention, hyperactivity, and others. Conduction disorder, CD, sometimes co-occurrent with ADHD, and it's a lack of respect for others, lack of reasoning. And Tourette syndrome is involuntary motor tics or vocal tics, typically accompanied by ADHD and CD. There are programs and settings in place in the least restrictive environment for students with learning disabilities. Counseling, locating needed services, and parenting advice is provided by the public school services. Early intervention teams at the home or other controlled locations from 2 to 5 years old. Services can be provided in the home, preschool, or daycare center. In the elementary school, the least restrictive environment is required. Parapros assist in the classroom, special education providers, couples with regular teachers, resource rooms. Colleges and universities provide assistance to LD students based on needs. The central nervous system in the body is responsible for learning. The nerves pick up signals and send them to the brain via the spinal cord, and there are electrical and chemical factors that influence these firings. Neurons fire, generating an electrical charge that reaches the next synapse and so on until the destination is reached. And chemical substances that are affected include dopamine, acetylcholine, and more. The anatomy of the brain, you have the brain stem that helps with breathing, heart rate, etc. The cerebellum that helps with body movements. The left hemisphere dictates function of the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere dictates the function of the left side of the body. Disabled individuals have been shown to have larger right hemispheres than non-disabled individuals. The frontal lobe is for problem solving, temporal lobe is for hearing and language, parietal lobe is for sensory, and occipital lobe is for visual. So anyone who got in an accident where they damaged any part of their brain may see deficits in these areas. Brain injuries can be caused by car accidents, sports, or falls, and can affect learning and behavior. The impact of an object hitting the skull can jar the brain and cause injury. There's more injuries in girls than boys due to their smaller frame. Learning and memory attention may be permanently impacted, but the body is highly plastic, which means that it can regrow the cells very fastly. People with brain injuries have higher rates of depression and sleep problems, and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder are common. Autism is a neurological language and social interaction disorder. They have problems with communicating and maintaining socially appropriate behaviors. There seems to be a structural difference in the brain, though a lot is not known about autism. It is thought to be heritable, which means that someone in the family could pass it on. People with autism have abnormally large brain volume in some areas and abnormally small brain volume in other areas, which can cause deficits socially, cognitively, and motor problems. And there is seem to be a chemical relationship between autism and the brain. ADHD in the brain, there is a link to environmental toxins like lead, when that was a big issue. It causes inconsistent processing of sensory input. There's a brain maturation delay, lack of general consensus as to why, no one really knows. It could be a biochemical issue, like for the hyperactivity part, and it can include impulse control issues. Biochemical influences on learning. Ritalin, Cylert, and Adderall are all stimulants that can be given to kids who have ADHD. Ritalin can help with the inconsistent messages in neurological systems and tics. They seem to have better school performances, but irregularities can be influenced by substances we eat, things we drink, and pharmaceuticals, and it can decrease appetite, shakiness, trouble, or increased sleepiness, and is a personal choice. Memory. To learn, we have to be able to store data in memory and retrieve as needed. There's thought to be a memory molecule. Memories are stored in the hippocampus. Memory is benefited when there's a quiet classroom, visual support, and on average, it takes kids 22 exposures to be stored to long-term memory. In learning disabled people take more time to retrieve this knowledge, sort tasks, and process things. Metacognition is the knowledge and control individuals have over their own thinking and learning, the ability to choose the best way to learn information. They're taught different skills as students get more mature. These are things such as note-taking, verbal self-mediation, mnemonics, and mapping or graphing organizers. Phonological processing problems. The first sign is delayed speech with corresponding reading and writing issues at a young age, difficulty with the way the brain processes sounds and orders of language, difficulty acquiring alphabetical or phonetic reading strategies, slow to recall correct sounds, difficulty consistently spelling words correctly, and anomalies in left temporal lobe area of the brain. A timeline for the laws of learning disabilities. In 1969, Children with Specific Disabilities Act was passed. In 1973, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act was passed. In 1975, Education of All Handicapped Children, FAPE. 1990, Individuals with Disability Education Act. In 2000, No Child Left Behind Act. Parental rights in the law. The parents can be involved and should be involved in evaluation and the planning process for children with disabilities. There is a two-way exchange of information between teachers and parents. There needs to be trust. That really helps. And legally, the parents must be given the rights to confidential treatment of records, review and inspect the letters, have copies of any documentation on file if wanted, and they have more. IDEA's verse Section 504. The purpose of IDEA is a federal statute to ensure services for disabled children. The scope is all school-age children who fit into the specific categories, which you can find on the IDEA website. Funding provides additional funds. Enforcement is the U.S. Department of Education. Access evaluation is written notice to parents, and placement is reevaluation, not required IEP team review decision. The purpose of Section 504 is civil rights law to protect individuals with handicaps. The scope is all school-age children qualified as handicapped. Funding does not provide additional funds. Enforcement is the U.S. Office of Civil Rights. Access evaluation is notice to parents, and placement is reevaluation is needed for a change of placement. Parents as advocates. Information on how to be an advocate can be found easily online. The Learning Disabilities Association provides information for parents about types of educational legislation in place, sample form letters to send to schools, different types of learning disabilities, and there's the website. Another good tool is Reading Rockets and Rights Law. Students' rights. Students have the right to receive due process, heard in the defense of self, and right to review all documents, treated with respect and courtesy by school staff, receive prompt hearing if he or she is suspended or faces expulsion, expect safe learning environments, receive a free and appropriate public education, and be provided accommodations for learning disabilities. Teachers' rights and obligations. Teachers have the right to work in a safe environment, be treated respectfully by students. To be able to teach, they have the obligation to notify the parents before beginning the evaluation process to set up an IEP, the obligation to follow guidelines set in the IEP, and realize that parents have the right to access anything in the students' files. The purpose of BIP: if students have trouble following school or class rules, behavior needs should be evaluated. There's a meeting scheduled with the parents to write a behavior intervention plan via BIP, and each person involved should get a copy. It's a legally binding contract. Suspension and expulsion right. Suspension. Schools are allowed to suspend a student for up to 10 days a year. Before suspension on the 11th day, an IEP team has to meet to make a BIP and behavior goals or review existing BIP. Expulsion. Pre-expulsion IEP meetings is held. They must ask is the student appropriately placed? Is all the FAPE paperwork up to date? Is there a link between behavior and disability? MET. When a student is identified as possibly LD, the school conducts an evaluation or provides notice that will not conduct an evaluation. It explains the reason why. The multidisciplinary evaluation team, MET, reviews the results and other available information and helps explain what your child needs based on the evaluation. Read. Review of the existing evaluation data. It begins with a review of the existing evaluation data on the child, including the child's classroom work, his or her performance on state or district assessments, criterion reference, information provided by the parents. The purpose is to decide if the existing data is sufficient to establish a child's eligibility and determine educational needs. The Michigan Department of Education uses READ to describe the review of existing evaluation data and the evaluation of planning process. IEPT is the Individualized Education Program Team. It determines if your child is eligible for special education services based on your child's need and the state eligibility criteria. Parents, students, teachers, and other important individuals are part of the IEP team. The initial IEP and transition IEP. The initial IEP is the first IEP, and it must be in place within 30 days of the evaluation meeting determining eligibility. Transition IEPs measure appropriate and measurable post-secondary goals. They meet annually and update based on age-appropriate transition assessments and include transition services when they get to the appropriate age, including courses of study that will enable students to meet post-secondary goals. The annual review IEP is a meeting to develop, review, and or revise a student's IEP. It's a basic plan and service based on input from you and the professionals working around your child. It sets recommendations for the next year's program, and IEPs can be reviewed at any time but are traditionally done annually. Reevaluation IEP is triannually or a parent-teacher requested happens after an initial evaluation. The purpose is to see if your child